RealAgriculture.com's presentation of Unlocking Innovation, a national call to action, is brought to you by BioEnterprise Canada. Welcome to episode 3 of the Unlocking Innovation podcast, a national call to action brought to you by BioEnterprise Canada. Today is episode 3. We've got a great panel that's going to talk all about collaboration and connectivity. We're going to explore the importance of uniting fragmented networks and fostering partnerships amongst stakeholders. Let's get to the conversation. Okay, let's get to our panel. Up first, Darrell Petras, who is with Kane. Darrell, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, it's great to chat with you again. So, Darrell, tell us about Kane and what some of the things you do.
Sure. So CANE is the acronym for Canadian Agri-Food Automation Intelligence Network. We formed in 2019, got our feet under us really in 2020, dare I say, during COVID. We're well known for 3 things. We connect, we create, we cultivate. What does that mean? Connecting, bringing networks together, knowledge transfer, that kind of good stuff. And we have an online network, network.cane.ca, that accomplishes part of that. The create piece is where we help fund the development and demonstration, validation, demonstration of technologies. And the cultivate piece is our work to support smart farms in the development of proving out technology and really developing a test market through smart farms across Canada. That's ambitious for us right now. We do have reach into a few provinces, and we want to grow from there. And I need to highlight that we are funded by ISED, Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, originally for $49.5 million. There's been some top-up money since then. But I will say that ISED for short has been an instrumental partner in all this, helping develop our vision, not just acting in that traditional funding role. So that's CANE in a nutshell.
Cool. Also joining us is Dana McCauley with Canadian Food Innovation Network. Dana, great to chat with you and see you again. And tell us about the Food Innovation Network.
Yeah, so like CANE, we're also funded by ISED, although we have some other government partners, both regional and federal. And CFIN exists because we want to empower every food and beverage business in Canada to reach their full potential by investing in and adopting technology. And we really think that's going to drive competitiveness, productivity, and ultimately set us up for global leadership in the food and food tech spaces.
Great stuff. Well, welcome. And also no stranger here, almost should say co-host. It's Dave Smardon, President and CEO of BioEnterprise. Dave, how are we doing?
We're doing well, Shaun. Thanks for the invitation. As most of you will probably know, BioEnterprise Canada is a national innovation accelerator focused on agriculture and agri-tech. We are a national organization. We seek out impactful innovations, and we apply the resources necessary to bring those into the marketplace and make them successful.
Okay, let's get after it here. So we're going to start off by looking at solving some of the connectivity issues between farmers and innovators. And we did hear in different provinces that one of the big challenges, innovators, trying to get connected with farmers. So, Darrell, why do you think Canada has struggled to build a national mechanism for connecting farmers with ag tech entrepreneurs?
Shaun, I'm gonna use one word here. I'm gonna use the word diversity. Now, diversity is a great thing if the components are working together. I think Canada struggles in part with its vast geographical and agroclimatic diversity. For example, work that's being done in northern Alberta, let's call it broadacre, grain farm, oilseed farm, is going to be similar but yet very different than the same work, the same farm operating in southern Ontario. This leads to a bit of fragmentation, and we see it through CANE's lens as we focus on data-driven ag tech. What might work really well for automation, robotics, AI in one part of the country isn't necessarily working in another part. Therefore, we're finding there's kind of a lack of a centralized platform for data knowledge transfer. Now, when it comes to addressing this, let's call it matchmaking. There are a few ways to approach this. I think it could be as simple as a virtual network brings stakeholders together. And from my perspective, that could be like CANE's online network, where we, among other things, would like to connect idea generators, the founders, the ag tech companies, with farmers. Let's have them talk and make sure we're solving the problems that matter to the producers or the investors. Or it could be as complex, this matchmaking process, as building a software program that connects data, does knowledge transfer, connects even video feeds, I suppose. And this is something else that Keen has worked on, others have worked on in the past. And I think an important linkage here, though, is, and this is always, as of recently, I should say, a common theme for me. It's the opportunity to utilize smart farms in the matchmaking process. An integrated smart farm network across Canada, let's say coast to coast, maybe even, dare I say, one day coast to coast to coast, for data sharing, knowledge transfer, could help build the linkages between ag tech and the farming community, extending smart farms. And I won't go into a lot of detail on what a smart farm is. There's a couple of different definitions, but generally, a smart farm has capacity to test technology against industry standard. Not a lot of detail, but if we could link that into the farming community as well, commercial farms, I think we'd see a stronger opportunity for networking, building those linkages.
Yeah. Dana, do you see parallels or lessons from the food innovation side where startups struggle to find users for how, in just, overall, how we could build better two-way communication between the developers, the innovator, and the end users?
Yeah, it's same, but different. In the food end of the value chain, you have this huge, bulky, full of potential group of small food and beverage businesses that have fewer than 100 employees. And so, and then there's this very small group of anchor firms, less than 70. And those anchor firms, they have scouting and they have, national coverage and people aggregating information. But there's a lot of opportunity, first and foremost, for just those existing ambitious businesses to link up together and share knowledge and share information about how they've tackled problems and to sort of create this culture of innovation in Canada. Because right now stats show that in that tier of food businesses, most people just throw people at the problem, like, oh, we'll just hire more people, oh, we'll run more hours, that kind of thing. And so, the first element is getting them connected and talking to one another. And then the second element is turning those folks into test beds for the new innovation. And so we form I think the hub of that wheel and connect those folks in interesting ways. We do that both with boots on the ground through our regional innovation directors and what we call IRL, in real life experiences, and online through our Yodel platform, where because of the breadth and the time zones, et cetera, we try to do things 24/7, 365, because as we know, CEOs of growing businesses, whether they're food tech businesses or existing food and beverage businesses, don't necessarily work 9 to 5 necessarily. So yeah, there's it's a big country, and I think every industry can benefit from connecting the players in ways that aren't necessarily traditional. And so yeah, we do see a lot of similarity.
Yeah, that's kind of the advantage in today of technology, being able to connect people like that. So, Dave, some of the work you do at BioEnterprise across the innovation ecosystem, what role could accelerators and incubators play in bridging some of these communication gap between the entrepreneurs and the farm gate?
Well, right now we're in a situation where there's very little bridging that is done. Perhaps on an opportunistic basis, on a company by company basis, but and the bigger picture is not very much of it going on. If you go back to the days when we were all in high school, and you go to the high school dance, and on one side of the building are the men, on the other side of the building are the ladies, and it wasn't until 3/4 of the way through that they actually interacted with each other and started dancing. Well, the farmers and the entrepreneurs aren't dancing, and we need to find a way. We need to create a vehicle that gets them introduced to each other so that they can start dancing. And that's something that the incubators and accelerators can do, but even they are not that well connected into the producer organizations. And so that's where I think we have to begin is, well, we have all these entrepreneurs contacting us on a daily basis. We haven't made the efforts sufficiently enough to go in and introduce them to the Canola Council of Canada, Soy Canada, beef farmers, dairy farmers, and so on and so forth. That's something we have to do, and we can do it.
Yeah. Fascinating. This is one of the surprises. This was a learning exercise for me going through these roundtables and hearing this messaging about this disconnect that exists. So, Darrell, how do we train entrepreneurs, especially those from outside of ag, to speak the language of farmers when they do make the connection to convey some of the value clearly to the farmer without jargon or being hyperbolic and overhyping the tech?
Yeah, yeah, good question. I mean, everyone's throwing out terms like AI, machine learning on a frequent basis, and
Yeah.
and I wonder if many have a clear understanding of what that even means, even if they're coming from the technology side of the equation. So I think when it comes to training entrepreneurs, I think there are a couple elements to this. And we can't overlook the idea that we need to train entrepreneurs, and there are already some are doing a wonderful job of it, train entrepreneurs to build successful, scalable companies. They need to understand what it takes to move from an idea to servicing a customer, to servicing a market, to servicing an industry. And if we don't have that skill set in the entrepreneur, um, we're not going to have confident companies who can rise to the occasion and service the technologies when servicing is required. And I'll use an example there. Growing rapidly, but not having a lot of experience growing a tech company rapidly, one might find themselves in a situation where they are offering a technology in, let's say, a 6 week harvesting season in Alberta, and all of a sudden the technology has a problem, and that problem is common to all the sales of the technologies. How does this maybe small company address that challenge? So prepping the entrepreneurs for what they're about to, I almost want to use the word endure, what they're going to experience is very important. So understanding their company is a critical piece of it. But more to your point or to the question, how do we help them communicate with farmers, speak the language of farmers? And I think what it comes down to is on farm or farm gate exposure, right? To understand the operational realities of a farm or ranch. The founders, the entrepreneurs need to understand they're coming to in many cases, a very technologically advanced industry. And they don't necessarily have a leg up on the conversation because they can speak the jargon. They need to understand operationally what farmers are experiencing. And in my opinion, immersion is the best way to do this. Now, that may be a bit ambitious, but again, if we can set up pilot projects, collaborations where the entrepreneur is ideally working on a farm in a real working environment, that's fantastic. Test the technology there. We understand, we're starting to develop a common language. But even mentorship, farmers that are willing to spend some time with some of these tech founders. And I think that's a responsibility that us, the BioEnterprise, Kane, CFIN, we have this responsibility to make these connections, build this network, but just to improve the dialogue and then get away from that jargon like AI, which probably means artificial insemination to farmers in some cases, right?
Yeah.
And we start to talk cell fertility. We start to talk irrigation optimization, right? Let's have that common language. Let's reduce the risk through that common language, and let's not add to it. I think that's the goal.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so Dana, you're working a lot in the food space, so you're a little bit more consumer facing than say farmer facing. Do we have branding issues when it comes to agriculture and agri-food?
That's almost two questions, isn't it? Because does
I know.
agriculture and agri-food have a branding issue? That's a whole other webinar, right? It's interesting that you make the assumption that we're working in the B2C space, because most often the projects that we fund, which de-risk new technologies, are B2B products, because the innovators are usually working with some kind of a partner to either open up a new market opportunity. So for instance, a new functional ingredient would fall into that category, or to help them become more competitive and more productive. And good examples there would be machine learning, to use a phrase Darrell introduced to the conversation, to help make foods, their product development and their food safety and quality assurance systems go quicker, be more accurate, limit how much food goes on to, a QA hold, for instance. Or automations like robotics and that kind of thing. So very rarely are we actually working to help somebody figure out how to develop a new product that will have a label at your grocery store or be a menu item. So it's interesting because the folks who are doing the innovation, they first of all have to figure out how to sell that concept and that innovation and make sure it's aligned with their first customer, the company who will buy that from them, and that's a whole customer discovery journey. And then they need to also be able to articulate to that person how it's going to translate for them potentially in a consumer environment. If it does happen to be something that'll open up, like say we have one project where a new clean label ingredient is going to help their partners, like chocolate companies, to use way less sugar and reach a whole new consumer segment. So there's a lot of need for the people doing the innovation to understand like the full stream of how their innovation will impact their potential customer and then their customers. So it's an interesting journey that
And on top of that, Dana, too, there's probably like interesting, like, okay, where they think that their innovation solves X problem and they're not aware that it actually probably does Y and Z as well.
It's true. And most of the people who are, starting these really cool, innovative, very high-tech companies are often have spent many, many years within academia, right? They're graduates of masters in biotechnology or, computer science PhDs, and they don't know anything about food service or food and beverage processing, and they often, it's as I think the others articulated it really well. They often are solving really cool problems, but not problems that people are willing to pay for. So there's often that test and learn part of their journey can be quite uncomfortable as they learn that this is a good idea, but nobody cares.
Yeah. Well, Dave, we also need to talk about educating VCs, right? How can Canada better educate some of the VCs out there and institutional investors about, honestly, agriculture's got some different timelines when it comes to the innovation space?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, if you start at the bottom end with the angel investors and the family offices, traditionally, those types of investors invest in the sectors that they came from or the sectors where they made their money. So someone who made their money in oil and gas is typically going to reinvest in oil and gas when they're getting ready to retire or when they have money to invest. And the same thing with pharmaceuticals and so on. It would be nice to have an opportunity to get farmers into some sort of investment vehicle because they're the ones that know farming the best. That's been a challenge for us. As you move up the chain, yes, there are organizations, pension funds and other organizations that don't understand how the food hits the table. So, when the CEO of a venture capital firm goes home and has his steak and so on and so forth, he never asks those questions or she never asks those questions. So and I have to admit, when I first came to BioEnterprise, I had no idea. So these are things that, we can do to educate them. The other piece to this, I think, is there are success stories.
Yeah.
Success stories that we've had, we're not very good at disseminating the successes and talking about them and saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is one of many that are in the hopper that could be equally successful. And it's not how I think most of the incubators and accelerators across the country think of things. I mean, once a company, if they're able to get some money in the company, the one thing in budgets that we have that is limited is our ability to advertise and get that information out there into the marketplace.
Yeah.
Particularly in a targeted way to the rest of the investment community.
Sorry, Dave. Don't you think too that a lot of the existing accelerators don't really, they don't have an ag or a food stream, and so the companies that have ag or food tech, sort of true personas, they get, clustered under clean tech, and so there's a lot of confusion. And we did some research that we released in February with data up to November 2024, and we discovered that in the last 6 years, we went from having lots and lots of ag tech companies and just a couple of food tech companies to now having actually of the agri-food tech continuum, there being 75% of the companies in operation are actually food tech companies. And investors, unless we put out that report and talk about it ad nauseum, they don't know that because they can't see what's popping off, right? And so it's interesting. It's almost like we need a futures type of reporting mechanism so that the VC community knows how to kind of balance their portfolio between things that are established and that they trust and they know, and then to, I don't know what the appropriate percentage would be, but to try and create this culture where they all, try, 2% new types of investments each year or something. I don't come from that world, so I don't know what the right numbers are.
I mean, it would be interesting if you've got three national organizations here, and there's probably a handful of others. And we all have our own newsletters and our own social media, efforts and so on. But if you were to take the success stories that come out of these three and perhaps NPC and a few others, and say we're going to create something just for the investment community, and that might help to make a difference.
Yeah.
Could I jump in with just a quick thought? I agree with everything that's been said. I think that's a wonderful idea, Dave, building off of Dana's suggestions. I will highlight, though, that there are a couple of great examples and probably more, but two that come to mind in terms of ag accelerators that are gaining more and more traction in Canada. Ag, maybe not, on the food side too, I would argue, and that's Cultivator and Thrive have been doing a lot in Canada and internationally to support this. So working with initiatives like that are on the ground and they're running, and then building a narrative, a story for the venture capital community could be very impactful.
So Darrell, do you believe, whether it's government or other stakeholders, we're doing enough to build investor confidence in ag tech or food tech startups, and what's missing if anything?
Sure. So that's a broad audience or a broad list of stakeholders. So I think we can all agree that we can probably all do more at some level. Let me think about the federal government, because I've been working with them closely in this role, of course. They're certainly doing a lot through initiatives like the SIF program. That's the program through ISED, throwing acronyms out here, but the federal government branch that funds CANE, funds CFIN, funds National Products Canada, and others. And the program is designed to put some government dollars into projects, in our case, AI data-driven projects, ag tech projects, but there's a matching piece. Private investment needs to be at the table. And if we follow our investments to date at CANE, and I know that CFIN and others have had wonderful successes as well, for every dollar that we've invested to date, it can be linked to $15 return through private capital transactions. So quite a story. Are we telling that story enough to Dave's comment? I don't think we are. So that's the storytelling piece. But the other piece of this is, if we step back for a second and we look at startup companies, ag tech companies, and they're looking for funding, they need funding to test the technology, develop technology, validate, demonstrate. Then they're looking for money to scale, and they're always looking for, some serious investors who are in for, shall we say, or in with patient or more patient capital because it's agriculture. Well, it's no different when you're in a CANE position, a CFIN position, or a BioEnterprise position, I'm sure, speaking for the group here, because we don't have long-term support from government initiatives in most cases. When I say long-term, we might be on 3 to 5 year funding cycles, but if the innovation takes 5 to 10 years, that's 5 to 10 growing seasons in some cases for agriculture, to see real commercialization success, we need to think about longer timelines when it comes to supporting initiatives like ours. And then I'm gonna switch gears here a little bit and talk about regulatory, because what good government policy discussion doesn't touch on regulatory? And I will say that I support anything that supports the government's ability to make timely regulatory decisions. I am not critical of their processes by any means. I just know that the innovation community relies heavily, in some cases, for some types of innovation, whether it's for microbes or whether it's for drones, on a timely regulatory process. and lots of communication back and forth and how that's going. And again, not a criticism, just know that it's on everyone's mind and want to acknowledge that.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
so, so, oh, sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, no,
Okay.
no.
So, Dana, on the food side, what is working well when it comes to, well, talent acquisition and how, and I just want to take some learnings from that and how we potentially extend that to farmers and rural tech innovators. Is there some things you can pull out of what your experiences are?
Well, there's a lot of really big challenges for existing, and traditional food businesses in having enough labor and being able to find the right people in the right place and keep them. Training is a huge issue. What we see, though, is there's a lot of really interesting ways that technology companies are tackling those issues, both in restaurants and on sort of the shop floor of food processing, particularly using, AR and VR, to give people training where they aren't actually on, in a food safe environment, messing things up and being able to. I love this. We have this one. Quebec-based company, DeepSight, and their CEO, he talks about Jean-Guy, and Jean-Guy is going to retire, and that's huge. Like tons and tons of people are retiring out of food and ag. I know a lot of farmers are aging out,
Yep.
and their whole thing is how do we capture, everything Jean-Guy knows, not what's in the manual, but you turn the knob, but you go slow until you get to 3, and then you can turn it faster. Like all those little tiny things that you don't know until you use your machine. So, that I think is really exciting. I understand, though, that not all farms have the connectivity that, an urban or suburban based food business would have, and that, getting those types of systems to be operational in farm environments might not be as successful. But definitely that I love the way technology is being used for training and to make it more engaging, and to make it engaging in particular for younger people who are super comfortable with things being gamified and having, technology involved.
Yeah, well put. Okay, so let's look at breaking down barriers to adoption and on farm and some of the downstream impacts here. So, Dave, I'm curious, what's your take on why adoption remains such a struggle on farm? There's definitely some clear barriers, complexity, upfront cost, and ROI, and that the, those barriers exist even when the innovation clearly shows some sort of tested ROI. Like there is some test cases that have proven it out. Is it primarily a trust issue with new tech, or are the innovators failing to meet farmers where they are, or be able to, like Darrell hit on some of the lingo?
I think it's both of those things. Um, I think first of all, if you go back in history, major corporations would meet with the farmers and they'd say, hey, if you use this product, you're going to get a 25, 30% increase in productivity and output. And so the farmers would try it and they'd get 2%. And they became known as snake oil salesmen. So, the farming community has a natural, hesitation on new technology. But the other thing is that in this day and age, technology has moved so fast, farmers don't necessarily know what's out there, what's available. And so there's this disconnect that we talk about has become a critical issue. We have probably over the years we've had probably 3,000 companies and probably 2,800 or something innovations that we have supported in some way or another. And farmers have no idea about what's out there. So that's the first issue. The second issue is, entrepreneurs don't speak the language, and many of the entrepreneurs have never even been to a farm before. So, there's a disconnect there. Then the things that you mentioned, Shaun, which is, if I do find the innovation, where do I go to get it? How do I implement it? And what's the cost? And can I afford it? And are there any subsidizations or any programs available to help me do this?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of missing pieces. But if you break it down and look at those missing pieces, they're just check boxes that we as national organizations could solve if you just tackle them one at a time. Instead of don't boil the ocean right away, just take them one at a time. One of the things that we're trying to do is to form a farmer innovation advisory. Because when we're looking at a new opportunity, there's no farmers sitting in the room, and there should be. So, if for chicken farmers, there should be a few chicken farmers in there that can say, I don't know why you're doing this because it doesn't make sense to me. Or, man, if I had this, I would use it in a heartbeat.
And that's exactly how our programs work. We get industry at the table when we set our funding themes. And they review applications. So if you want to talk about that offline, I'm sure you can do it without me, but happy to share learnings.
Oh, that's great.
And Dave, I think the other disconnect here is sometimes there's innovations coming to the marketplace that don't actually solve a problem that farmers actually have, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like I've seen that too. I've done some, I've been to a lot of different conventions and trade shows, and there's somebody at 10 by 10 booth that's got a new tech, new innovation, and it sounds really cool. We shoot the video, publish it on YouTube, and then somebody will put a comment. I don't actually know if this is even a problem. That's there's a disconnect there.
The flip side is that a lot of the innovators are solving Industry 4.0 problems, which is where we want everyone to be. But a lot of our food companies, and I'm guessing I live in farming country, even though I run a food organization, they're lucky to be at Industry 3.0, right? So we have to make sure that the community is, even though if they and that solves it, that they can adopt it, right? Or do we want them to buy Lamborghinis and drive them in first gear? Like, no, we don't. We want so I think there's a real technology adoption readiness role, and that's something that CFIN is working on for the future, is how do we migrate those, and generally speaking, it's those mature companies, the ones we love. You open up your cupboard and you're like, oh yeah, that's a great Canadian brand. Well, if it was started 20 years ago, my guess is chances are the founder is still the CEO and he or she is still tackling problems with the same equipment that they used before because it works and they trust it. And they, it's like when they change the iPhone charger, they still have the old iPhone. They can't use the new charger.
Yeah.
Hey, go ahead, Dave.
If I could, really quickly. We're talking a lot about farmers and the farmers' appetites and so on for this kind of stuff. But there's a layer that we're not talking about, and that layer is the farmer producer associations. Mm-hmm. And the frustration that we have seen is that innovation up until very recently has not been a top priority for those associations, as they invest in research and they're lobbyists for the government, and they make sure that the business risk management is coming through and so on. But innovation just hasn't made the grade. We're seeing some changes now, but it's by no means across the board.
Yeah. Hey, Darrell, when it gets to this proving tech out, I want to circle back on smart farms and the role that they play, and validating tech as it becomes more and more de-risked downstream.
Yeah, appreciate that. I'll share some thoughts. So when we talk about smart farms and validating, it only works if some pieces fall into place. And I think the most important piece there is probably trust. We need trust among farmers. We need trust among the ag tech companies and the investors that the smart farm model will work. And again, for the listener, a smart farm, and I touched on this briefly, and I promise not to get too much detail, but I just want to add a layer to it. So a smart farm has the capacity to test technology against the industry standard. So a startup company or ag tech company A comes in, tests their technology, and the smart farm has the ability to say, this is good, it works, and maybe even enough insight to say we're actually solving a problem that matters. Maybe that's not their role, but the feedback from the smart farm is trusted feedback. Now imagine that works in one area. Let's say Olds College. So not to name drop, but a lot of good ag schools across Canada. If it works at Olds College, will it work at Guelph? And that's why we need multiple smart farms. We're not sure. Going back to my earlier comments. And then we start to think about, well, can we imagine what a network of smart farms from coast to coast could do to demonstrate the technology and to build that trust, show return on investment, and then take that one step further and connect it to a network of commercial farms. So let's call it, regular farmers, for lack of a better description. Regular producers could be farmers, ranchers, you name it. If we're using organizations like our post-secondaries or government-affiliated testing sites connected to commercial farms, I think the results we're going to get off there could be very trusted. And that network across Canada could be like no other network in any other jurisdiction, I'll say that. Now, this is all blue sky, right? Like this will take money, it'll take coordination. So the question is then, if we're going to build up that level, that capacity, and we're going to do it so that trust is never compromised ever along the way, how do we support that? And that's a question around, well, it gets, we come back to the word diversity of funding. I wouldn't expect government to fund all of that. That could be an expensive undertaking. It would be great if government could support a good portion of that, because that, like other projects we've done, like other programs we run, it attracts the private investment. And if the model's working and we're seeing that trust built, I think then we move to a membership model. There's a desire, there's a brand there, right? There's some value associated with that brand where people want, or organizations want to be part of that. And then when we have a membership model, so I'm just touching on the contours, but I think there's a really strong model there that's unique to Canada that can help build a network that can validate, demonstrate technology, and create these test beds across Canada. But again, along the way, and it's a common theme of today's conversation, it comes back to communication. We need to do a good job of communicating the value proposition and not just saying, hey, there's another research site, or this is another academic exercise. It's not. It's a critical platform for de-risking innovation, accelerating adoption, and really fostering collaboration. And at the end of the day, if we demonstrate return on investment for the producers, because we're here for the producers, ultimately, we will be successful. So I think smart farms have, I went deeper and probably broader than you anticipated, but I think smart farms have a huge opportunity here, and we as Canada have a huge opportunity using smart farms in the ag ecosystem.
Well, you could also actually use them to break down some of those barriers that exist when it comes to communication, right? We get a lot of silos and people sort of within the country and need more of that collab and communication happening cross jurisdiction.
100%. So if we take that collaboration, communication just among, let's call it, stakeholders involved in smart farm or smart farm members, if we take that one step further and then we think about, well, data, right? We haven't really touched on data in a lot of detail, but what conversation with respect to ag tech doesn't eventually touch on data? If we had a platform to share data real time between, I used examples already, but post-secondary, on one part of Canada to a commercial farm, another part of Canada, and collect, aggregate, anonymize data, I think we could have a national effort here that could have a lot of value as well. So I'm sorry, I come at this from kind of a business-minded perspective, because if it's not going to be sustainable on an economic level, then maybe we're spinning our wheels a bit. But I think there's a lot of opportunity on a couple of levels here, not just demonstration, but on the communication, data aggregation, and there are platforms being developed, including one that we've supported through a company called Theory Mesh, to achieve some of this. So I guess my word here is momentum. There's a lot of momentum, and let's continue to build on it so they can be, the smart farms can be one of the showcases in which we move ag tech, and this model, I'm sure, can be applied in food tech as well, move those innovations forward.
Dana, were you trying to jump in there earlier?
No, I was just enthusiastically listening.
Okay, well, it was good. Okay, so Dana, I'll go to you next. In food processing and retail, we often talk about tech readiness and adoption. How do we get downstream players more actively engaged in innovation?
Yeah, with the risk of sounding like a broken record, it's at proving to them that they can trust it, that it's going to work. I don't know that the example Dave used, the snake oil salesman applies directly in food tech, but I think it's we've got a lot of really overwhelmed people. They run food businesses through COVID, through this trade war, and everything else that's just considered normal. And they're exhausted, and they are in the middle of the forest. So I think that there's a really interesting opportunity for folks like CFIN and the government, and maybe players like FCC and BDC to go in and help them to say, okay, look, if you were to do these 4 things in this order, they would create an outsized change for you. And look, here are the Canadian-made solutions that will solve those problems. And here's a bunch of others that, you should be having your long-term plan. And I think they need that. These folks, as I mentioned, there's just in food and beverage processing, over 4,300 companies that are, doing a lot of heavy lifting. They have less than 100 employees. And those CEOs, they are wearing lots of hats, and they're most focused on making payroll, right? So if we can go in and give them some things that they can do that are, will fit, like I said, the right iPhone, the right charger, and and they'll see those results, and then we can tell those stories. I think that adopting innovation will be on their growth strategies, and that the culture will shift. It'll just change because Dave, you made a comment, I don't know, someplace, I think maybe last September when we were together, about how you go to Canadian Tire and you buy a snowblower. Well, damn it all, when you plug it in, you want to blow your snow. And I've said that over and over again to people, because that is exactly what the technology's got to do, right? It's got to be what it says on the label.
Now, Dave, we heard through the output of these roundtables that there's opportunities for more like concierge style model to bring people together on the right projects at the right time. One of the things that scares me is when as Canadians, when we do these kinds of roundtables like we've done, is that the result is we need a committee. Or, that kind of thing, which just kind of creates more bureaucracy. And then we try to figure out how all these things just kind of coexist. And we spend all of our energy on that instead of okay, let's get something done. How do we set up, how do we make, drive change without creating more bureaucracy and friction for us getting stuff done?
Well, there's $1 million question. Part of what we're trying to do with these roundtables is to keep our foot on the accelerator with the government. And at the same time, it is creating news out there in the space. We're getting phone calls from various organizations that want to be a part of whatever it is we're doing. But I think the other piece to this is the private sector, and it's been a struggle getting the private sector engaged, and by private sector, I'm really talking about corporations, the big food companies, the big agriculture companies that exist in Canada, and not so much the multinationals, but the ones that are domiciled here and grew here and have become global leaders. They're not at the table either. So I think we have to get a critical mass of support for what we're trying to accomplish here and move these things forward. No, we don't want this thing, filed away in a filing cabinet, and we don't want more committees and more studies done. We know what the problems are. We live in the trenches every day here, the 3 of us, and there's a bunch of others that do as well. So we are the ones that have the expertise. We're the ones that can lead this, and we're the ones that can drive it. And that's what we have to do. I really believe that.
Okay, well, I'm going to pose a question to all 3 of you to wrap up here. Let's just pretend that Dave was in early on Bitcoin. And he's going to cash out. He's got, say, I don't know, $10 million. And I said, okay, you got $10 million earmarked to strengthen collaboration and connectivity in the agri-food innovation ecosystem tomorrow. Okay. Where would you spend it first, and why? Dana, do you want to go first?
Well, I might have already told you that what I would do with it. It would probably be on that helping these unlock growth. Even a small percentage of growth, 5% in this huge group of companies would have a big impact for Canada. So $10 million sounds like a lot when you think about your personal household budget, but when you think about and I'm talking just post Farmgate, $102 billion GDP, sector that employs 2 million people. That's not a ton of money when you start disseminating it. So I think I would put it into, proving to people that technology adoption and working with tech innovators isn't a waste of time, and get people turned on and wanting to be part of that movement.
Darrell, what are you doing?
I'm betting on Kane Seafin and BioEnterprise. But apart from that, like data, it's more of what I've just shared. It's in the proof and trust principles. I'm betting on smart farm networks. Have gone into that in lots of detail. There's another piece here that I think we should be well aware of. There is good support, and maybe it could be better depending on who you talk to. Maybe it could be a lot better, but there's good support for the ideation stage of the innovation process, and that is thinking post-secondaries, like university level research. There's good support there, but there seems to be a gap between that innovation maybe going to prototype in an academic environment and then getting that innovation to the stage where it's attractive to investors, and maybe in some cases even becomes more attractive to someone like Kane. So I think there's more we could be doing to help with the technology transfer function, whether that's just promoting the innovation, the intellectual property that's available in Canada that hasn't been necessarily moving along because there's no company championing that. It's in a tech transfer office. No disrespect to a tech transfer office. It's just that I think they could use a bit more resources. And then there's a data collection and transfer function that I would like to bet on too. And I'm sure I'm overdrafted on my 10 million already, but building into the software space that can accumulate, aggregate, I should say, and anonymize and use the data from many farms and many different types of commodities across Canada. I think there's value there. And at the end of the day, I'll just say, if we're investing toward de-risking solutions, de-risk solution is a proven solution. So I think that's a common theme. I think I'm very much aligned with Dana on that.
Don't worry, Darrell. We'll just get Dave to mine some more Bitcoin. It's okay. Dave, how about you?
I would invest the 10 million to get 60 million. And then I would take that 60 million and apply it to the ecosystem.
Cheeky.
I don't think 10 million is going to do very much, to be honest. But what I've heard through all these podcasts, all these roundtables, is we need to fix the connectivity and adoption issues in Canada, coast to coast, and that means building collaboration, building cooperation, and increasing the capacity of everyone who plays in the system. And so to do that, you've got to be sharing information, you've got to be sharing opportunities, you've got to be working together. In some cases, maybe you're both working with the same company, doing slightly different things, but moving the process forward. So I'd be focusing on structure and process to bring the ecosystem together and make it act more nationally.
Great stuff. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Dana, thanks a lot for your contribution today. Really, really do appreciate it. It was great seeing you again.
Thank you. It's always like hanging out with you guys. It's best part of my day. Thank you.
It's great. Darrell, all the best to you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, great.
Thank you both for your leadership. Let's drive this thing. We got to get on this bus and drive it.
All right. I'll bring the snacks.
Pedal down. Dave, until next time, we'll see you later.
You bet. Thanks very much.